and welcome back to the Trainwell podcast, inspiring you to get stronger, move more, and have fun. On today's episode, we're going to battle. Joey and I are going to go at it. Not really, but we probably will end up going at it. We're going to talk about, should you care about fat loss? Everyone, I feel, gets into the fitness industry. Not everyone, but so many people get into the fitness industry because they want to lose weight and they want to lose fat. And we're going to talk today about whether or not this is something you should even actually care about.
Totally. And we're going to do this debate, this debacle with love and empathy, right, D?
And curiosity.
Yes, and curiosity and respectfulness. Okra, right? Open, curious, accountable, and respectful. And we want to keep our listeners, you guys, in mind at the center of this. And we don't want to make it so much for Darian and I. We want to whoever our audience is, you guys, we want to directly correlate it to you.
Yeah, I think this is a tricky topic because it is a huge pain point. A lot of people enter the fitness industry with a desperate desire to want to change their body, and usually that comes down to losing fat. So I think it won't come as no surprise to our listeners that I am more on the side of this is not something you should care about. So here's my first point. And this first point is from the movement of health at every size, that you can be healthy no matter what your size. It's only really at the extremes of the BMI scale. And I think everyone knows at this point that BMI is really not an accurate indication of health, but it is still used quite regularly. And it is only at the extreme ends, like very, very quote unquote underweight and very quote unquote overweight, where you're seeing health issues. And like in this very big range in the middle, you really can be healthy regardless of your size. And I'll give a few examples of this because we've, in our society, really demonized fat. Not so much anymore, but if you're around our age, like millennials and earlier, fat jokes were such a common thing in the media and just in life in general. It was like a common insult thrown around constantly. Like we've really demonized the fat body. And why? Why are we so scared of this? And then there was this fear mongering of like, well, if you're fat, if you're obese, you're going to die. You're going to die earlier than other people. But the truth is there's no physical appearance that you can look at someone and know if they're healthy or unhealthy. There are people in bigger bodies who have perfect blood work. They're healthy. There are people in smaller bodies. We talked about this in our last episode, who have super high cholesterol, like myself. So that's something I need to work on. And I think it really comes down to your habits. So regardless of the fat on your body, it's about the actions you're taking. And I'd like to propose that really should be the primary focus.
Well said there, buddy. By the way, did you get to your doctor yet? Did you schedule an appointment?
Oh, well, here's the thing is I was on vacation this past week. So, okay, to TBD on that one, but it will happen.
Well, D, you bring up a good point about, it does happen on the extremes. I agree that yes, it should be noted on the extremes. But here's my counter argument for this, okay, is that you can be quote unquote fat and healthy, right? Is that not for everybody, okay? We know, and I'm going to get to this in my next point, that the more increased fat you have, especially the visceral fat, and I want to talk about subcutaneous fat and visceral fat. Subcutaneous fat is like the fat like you can touch, like it's under your belly, it's in your thighs, etc. But the fat deeper inside is your visceral fat around your organs, and we know that both can be interrelated. And the reason why we want to keep track of it is because my next point I'm going to talk about is the health risk reduction we have with lower fat. Okay. So sure, you can be healthy and you can be quote unquote fat or higher fat, But why would you want to do that when you're fighting against your body every single day? Because we know that fat leads to higher inflammation. And if you're trying to build this resilient body on top of this inflamed foundation, don't do it. Make it work for itself. Any rebuttals there?
Well, I guess I just want to say that if you had a client whose goal was fat loss, you would have them, you know, clean up their diet a little bit, like make sure they're eating fiber and protein and reducing highly processed foods. You would have them start a movement practice. You would have them monitor their sleep and, correct any sleep issues, XYZ down the list. Now, I have a client who comes to me with a fat loss goal, maybe, and I say, you know what, I don't want to focus on that, but here's what we're going to do. It would be the same protocol. So, what I'm saying is it the fat that's the problem, or is it the habits in their lifestyle that's the problem?
You
In other
know,
words, a person in a bigger body, they're smoking, they're drinking, they're not exercising. What's the problem there? The fat or the habits?
agree. But I would, when I was getting ready for this talk, I thought about it's where the priority of the fat loss should the goal be between you and I. I think it should be a little bit higher than you.
Hmm.
But I want to say this thing, and I want to get to my next point or my positive is that, and people listening is fat loss, okay, is not the enemy. Fat loss is not the enemy. It's shame. Shame is the enemy.
Hmm.
Shame is the enemy. Okay, moving on. So my number one is health risk reduction. I have this list, okay, of listen to all these diseases that are associated with higher amounts of visceral fat. Cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerosis, chronic inflammation, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, osteoarthritis, hormonal imbalances, and I haven't even begun to talk about the cancers associated with strong fat links. Breast cancer, pancreatic, kidney, and liver cancers. So what I want to say is that yes, I understand that. I want the listener to understand that it's not always about this subcutaneous fat that we can touch that we're carrying around our midsection, because it's about a healthy, it's about a productive, and it's about a extremely resilient lifestyle that you can live in this body of yours that you only get once, right? And so you need to make that body as absolutely healthy as you possibly can. And a marker for that is to monitor that fat loss and have a goal. If your goal is to run a 5K, if your goal is to look better for a wedding, we all know that lower fat is going to be greater for that, right? And we're going to improve all these health markers I just mentioned and lower our risk for that, which is why we should always have fat loss in our protocol for a goal.
I will agree with you that it's there is the potential for people in bigger bodies to, you know, uh, I can't remember the word I'm looking for. Be more get these diseases, more easily, be more prone to these diseases. But every disease you mentioned can also be gotten by a person in a smaller body. People in smaller bodies can have type 2 diabetes. People in smaller bodies can get all of the cancers you just named. People in smaller bodies can have cardiovascular issues, and so on down the list. There are so many stories of people going to their doctor. And actually, this happened to me too. And I can't remember if I totally went into this, but I think I just mentioned it to you, Joey, after the fact, that I, as I told you, have very high cholesterol. When I went to see my doctor about that, she said, "Oh, that's probably a fluke," just by looking at me. And that was very off putting to me, because if I had been in a bigger body, she would definitely not have thought that was a fluke. She would probably start talking to me about, well, what's your diet like? What's your exercise routine like? XYZ, this is your fault. But this doctor looked at me and assumed, oh, this can't be right. But it is. And then she started listing off, oh, we see people who they're not taking care of themselves, and they're eating XYZ things. And I'm like, I eat those things. She's like, oh, you do? Like, shocked that I would eat ice cream and be in the body that I'm in. So there is this bias. And I guess what I'm saying is everyone is prone to these diseases. And I think it's way more so about the lifestyle um, and genetics than it is about the fat on their body.
Yeah, there's this thing called thin outside, fat inside. Have you heard of this? I just learned about it recently. And so just think it, even though you're on the quote unquote skinny side, right? There's the deeper fat, that visceral fat we're talking about, that is more prone to disease. That's more dangerous, right? And so even though someone can look lean, they may not be out of the clear, right? And so if I were your doctor, I would say, hey, let's do a DEXA scan. Let's look at a deeper scan of your body to discern whether or not you're healthy, quote unquote, or not. So check yourself before you wreck yourself with a very good clinician.
And the other side of that is people in bigger bodies, and this has happened to people I know, will go into a doctor with knee pain, and the doctor says, "Okay, lose weight." If I went into a doctor with knee pain, they would say, "All right, let's get some imaging done. Let's test X, Y, and Z. Let's see what's happening there. Let's get you into PT." They would actually take action. And why are they not taking action for someone in a bigger body? There's just this assumption that it's the weight, but they might have an actual legitimate knee issue that is causing that pain. But I think the next point that I want to make is the genetic component. Because even if I get the DEXA scan, and I don't have the visceral fat, it could be genetics. I mean, you cannot out exercise, out eat, out whatever genetics. And we've been taught in our society you can actually control the size and shape of your body with these behavior changes, but that is only to a limit. I mean, we really only have the amount of control, maybe like 15-20% control over that. If someone came to you and said, I want to get taller by, hanging on the bar and stretching my body out and whatever, we go, well, you can't get taller. That's crazy. But for some reason, we think it's so easy and doable to change the literal size and shape of your body. We can easily believe that because we've been taught that it is true. But no one's going to believe that you can behavior change yourself into getting taller or changing your eye color or, changing your hair color or whatever it may be. And I want to put it out there for people that actually you have way less control over the size and shape of your body than you think. And that is to say, it is not your fault if you are in a bigger body. That is your body. And maybe some of the negative health outcomes you're experiencing are because of the bias against you because of your bigger body, the shame, like Joey said, than it is the actual fat on your body, which you have less control over than you think.
Absolutely. And environmental factors, right? That
Mm.
both
Mm-hmm.
both genetics and environment make fat loss hard. Like everyone knows that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will say yes, definitely, but difficulty does not equal impossibility. Okay, let me say it again. Difficulty does not equate to impossibility. Okay. And your fat loss means that you should respect your biology, right? And you want to work within your reality. Don't try to do things that somebody else did. Work within your framework. We cannot control all these factors, right? But we can care about what we change. And I don't want to say this with fat loss, okay? It's not so much about the mirror, okay? It's not in the mirror. It's about the blood work. Period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Number 2, my number 2 is improved quality of life with lower fat. Let me get into this, okay? Lower body fat means more energy. Lower body fat means better sleep. Lower body fat means, not all the time, reduced joint pain. I think you and I can both agree, though, if we can play devil's advocate, that person with the knee pain who is overweight, right? the doctor's saying that because they've probably experienced a lot of those heavyweight individuals losing weight. And we know for a fact you'll have less joint strain, right? I agree with you that it's different. People are treated differently who walk in, right? The skinny person with knee pain, they get action. I agree with that. But we know that less inflammation, which fat can have, right? We know that can lead to joint inflammation, tissue inflammation, et cetera, et cetera. And we have increased mobility, right? For many, fat loss correlates with, especially in today's world, more self-esteem, right? Better mental health. I think fat loss, when you lose fat and you can track it and you do so appropriately, it's one of the highest, most self-fulfilling things you can ever do in your life, because you have changed your physique, you have changed your health markers, and you've done it like I said, in the correct way. And it boosts this confidence, this resiliency around you, that you can now live in this new framework that you couldn't be before.
Yeah, I will agree with everything you said, but I want to agree with that on an individual level. If a client came to me and said, "I lost weight and now my knees feel amazing. I lost fat and now my knees feel amazing." I would believe them. That's their personal experience. I just don't want to generalize that, because there are people with legitimate issues who, regardless of a weight loss, would still have those issues. And I think that is the thing that I really desperately want to be explored and taken seriously. But also, when my clients in bigger bodies come to me and say, because of their belly abundance or their breast abundance, they can't properly reach across to get their seatbelt. That's really hard. Or they can't properly or easily get up and down from the floor because of their body size. I'm taking that seriously. I'm not saying, no, 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 you can do it. I am taking their experience seriously, but I don't want to generalize that experience. I know people who are in bigger bodies that are far more flexible than I am and can move incredibly well and do things I, couldn't, that are so outside of the realm of where I am right now, like in terms of flexibility. So it's not generalized. But the real point that I want to make on quality of life is, yes, if you lose fat, you might feel more confident. You might get these other benefits. But I want you to take into account what you have to do to get there. And it might be something that is not enjoyable, that is very unsustainable for you, potentially. Because the truth is that when people diet, and we know that exercise is not actually an effective form of weight loss, it is a more effective form of, like, you can change your body composition, but really nutrition is like the number one way of like losing fat and losing weight. And we know for sure that most diets, 99% or more, even if they're short-term fat loss, the weight gain is the predictor of dieting. People gain weight back and more sometimes, and their metabolism decreases much of the time. They have metabolic damage. So what I'm trying to say is, if you put yourself on a strict diet and you're doing extreme things and you lose weight, is that really the life you want to live for that fat loss? Because it's not as if you can lose the fat and then just go right back to the way you were. You're now forever beholden to this very restrictive, regimented routine to maintain that. And is that a way to live? Even a lot of times when someone loses fat unintentionally, like they get sick, that is not maintained. That your body, there is a set point theory, and the theory is that you have a set point body weight that is, that you can move, that moves itself within, like, 10 to 20 pounds in either direction pretty easily. But once you're outside of that range, maintenance is extraordinarily hard, and your body will do whatever it can to get you back to that set point range. So in terms of quality of life, consider what you might have to do to get the fat loss that you're hoping to achieve.
And let's just say that losing fat is not about shrinking your worth. It's about expanding your potential, because you'll get so caught up with losing fat. Keep in mind, right? There's other things that go on that lay this foundation, which is my next point I'll talk about later, to it's just a bedrock for all other things become easier.
Okay, so I'm going to make a point now. I want to make the point that almost kind of to what Joey just said, um, about living your life and things becoming easier, and to really investigate that. What is it right now that you're not doing or that you think you can't do because of the size of your body or because of the fat on your body? I believe that fat phobia is real. I believe that there is a bias towards people in bigger bodies. And I also believe that body image is within you. Regardless of what anyone else thinks of you, it is within you to be able to feel the way you want to feel about yourself and live the way that you want to live. So even if certain things would become easier for you, how can you make them easier right now? Let's go back to the seatbelt example. Um, yes, it might be hard for you to reach across to put your seatbelt on because of a limited range of motion because of your body size. But there are tools that they make that you could make it easier for yourself to grab your seatbelt. Like, I don't know what they're called, but they make these like extenders, things like that. There are ways that you can start making your life easier for yourself. For example, let's say clothing. It is disrespectful to yourself to continue to shove yourself into clothing that is tight and uncomfortable. And you could continue to feel really horrible about that and feel really uncomfortable in your clothing. Or you could buy clothing that is bigger, that fits you better, and that is more comfortable for you to wear. And that would also make your life easier. And there is no shame in going up in a size. Because when you actually wear clothing that fits properly, you start to feel better. You start to feel like you can move easier. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you don't need to internalize a lack of ease in your life as a failure on yourself.
Shame.
There are things you can do to make things easier regardless of your body size, because it is not a moral failing if you do not lose weight or lose fat, or and it's not a moral failing if you don't even want to. You do not have to want to lose fat, and that is 100% okay and your choice because you have autonomy.
Totally. There's a difference between caring about your health and chasing this validation, right? I believe, deeply believe, you can pursue fat loss for energy, for health, for strength, not just for the looks, not just for the feeling, but for a deeply rooted purpose of solely becoming healthier. So let's stop equating this fat loss with vanity. Let's stop equating this fat loss with this, social media pressure, because for many people, when it's done right, it is a huge form of empowerment, hands down. Darren, I think we should just go over one more point. I'll go with that. It's a foundation for other goals. Lower fat, right? Reducing this excess load on you can make your strength goals, your endurance goals, your performance goals, live longer goals, the ability to play with your grandchildren without getting out of breath goals, whatever those goals are, they're just easier to achieve, right? And fewer injuries, right? We know for sure that like the way injuries can creep in is if we don't move well, if we don't have the good mobility because we're in a bigger body, etc. Although I agree to your point, I've met bigger bodied people who are just like ballerinas. It's amazing, right? But going on a deeper level, it just sets this great foundation how you can live your life better. And again, it just raises all the ships. Your health gets better, the markers get better, then your confidence gets better, right? So at the end of the day, fat loss done right is not about being smaller. It's really about being freer, freer to move, freer to live, and to age well. So it's a goal that can literally save lives.
Yeah, and I truly genuinely agree with you. I think, like we said, a lot of people come to fitness with a fat loss goal. It is like this gateway goal. It gets them started, it gets them excited about building healthier habits. Um, My counter to that is, could we focus instead, though, on instead of losing, gaining? Could you go into it, and maybe this will just be a better mental shift for you, because we know that people can get very hung up with the numbers, and honestly, when someone goes on their first diet, that can be a catalyst for disordered behaviors moving forward. It is for a lot of people. It was for me. So it's not always the best idea mentally to focus on losing the weight, losing the fat. But could you go in and say, I want to gain strength. I want to gain mobility. I want to gain more energy. And everything you're going to decide to do, or that you'll work with a trainer to do, is probably going to be the same things that they would have you do if you came in saying, I want to lose fat. Only the mindset shift might be a little bit better and more motivational and less likely to get you to a place of feeling bad about yourself when you're not seeing the scale move, because it is a hard goal. Losing fat is not easy. It is quite challenging. If it were easy, no one would be in a bigger body. Everyone would have already lost the weight. So maybe focus on what you can gain instead of what you need to lose, quote unquote, need to lose.
And that's going to be our debate on fat loss, guys. You have heard it from Darian and I yourself. So figure out for yourself, where should your thoughts be with fat loss? We'd love to hear from you on, do you believe it should be a primary, a secondary? Share with us other metrics you like to track fat loss. Or are you more so on the route of where it should be a byproduct, or as Darian said, a gateway goal in your fitness journey? We'd love to hear from you. We're going to have more and more content coming, of course, with more and more of these. Whenever I do an episode with you, Darian, I just always think of all the little offshoots of channels we could talk about with this. So there's our debate on fat loss.
Thank you for listening. Please check the show notes to get a link to try Trainwell for free for 14 days and get matched with your very own personal trainer who can help you with whatever your goal may be.
Bye-bye.